Okay, welcome back, everybody. Very excited. Wonderful way to start the conference here. Really excited to introduce our second speaker. So if everyone wouldn't mind making their way back to your tables, that would be great. Thank you for all the great questions. Also, thank you for all the great questions online as well. One quick reminder, everybody, and we've learned this through the years the hard way. I think it works best for the question and answer if you do use the note cards. I wish we could accommodate yelling out questions or floating with mics, but usually for an audience this size, in a room of this type, it just seems to work a lot better. Everyone can hear the questions better if you do use the note cards. So just wanted to make that gentle reminder for you. And then also, we'll have Robin and Ashley and the team remind you as well at the Q&A session. So I am very, very excited to introduce Ann Olson. Ann has attended the conference for several years in the past, and now we couldn't be happier to have her as a speaker. Ann Olson has worked with older adults and their families for over 25 years as an occupational therapist and senior living consultant. She founded Sweet Basil Senior Care LLC in 2022 to directly address the needs of clients living with dementia and their families, a group she cares deeply about. Ann is the author of Making Peace with Dementia, an occupational therapist formula for optimizing care and restoring calm. She offers family dementia coaching calls, group training, and one-on-one companion care visits. So please welcome Ann Olson. Thank you. Hi, Ann. Yep. Just going to put this right here if that's okay.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm really short, so they got me a little booster chair. Just have to remember it's there. Hi, everybody. This is so awesome to be up here. I've attended this conference so many years, and it's so valuable. And I'm just realizing, too, that I actually began my career just across the river at the medical center there. And so it's kind of a full circle moment. But I'd love to get to know you a little bit better. So with a raise or show of the hands, how many of you are here because you have a friend or family member who is living with memory loss or dementia? Wow, okay. And then how many of you are professionals? Okay, and I'm sure there's an overlap, right? And you don't have to raise your hand for this next question, but just kind of notice it for yourself. On a scale from 1 to 5, how are you right now? With 1 being like, I am so chill and relaxed, and 5 being like max stress level. Just notice it for yourself. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And before we go any further, I'd just like to offer you something small, because I think care partners, we often just forget what calm even feels like. So if you're willing, could you please just close your eyes, get really comfy in your chair. Just take a slow breath in and out. Move your attention away from any noises in the room, any thoughts. And start slowing your breath down. Just make that breath in longer and the breath out longer. Imagine you're breathing in something refreshing and light, and breathing out all the tension. You are going to hear a lot of information today. And rather than judging yourself as lacking in an area, I would love you to focus on your abilities. You may even think, I made it here. And that is a remarkable accomplishment for this moment. Take one more breath. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Welcome back. And I know I probably risked putting you all to sleep within 2 minutes of starting my talk, but I think if there's anyone who needs a pause, it is a care partner. All right, well, I know people who have memory loss. Not everyone who has memory loss has dementia, but that is sort of my angle today. So I may use those words interchangeably. But my dementia story began about 30 years ago working with people who are experiencing changes or neurological changes. And if you're not familiar with what an occupational therapist does, essentially, in simple terms, we look at how health changes, like dementia, impact a person's ability to live their everyday life, and then we will try to come up with some strategies to help them really do the things that matter to them as independently and safely as possible. And we're going to hear a little later on from some other occupational therapists, so you'll kind of get a good taste of what OT is today. But so I've worked in rehab clinics and senior living, did some senior living consulting, and in the last few years, I have been working directly with people living with dementia and their families as kind of a companion care assistant, I guess, and a dementia coach. And it's, it won't be any surprise to you, I'm sure, that it's in these last few years that I've learned the most because, of course, being embedded with people in their homes and with their families in their daily life is a lot different than seeing them in the clinic for an hour, right? You professionals know that. So today, hopefully, we are going to talk about the changes we see in a person living with dementia, why this is happening. Talk about all the knowledge and skills you already have. You may not know that, but you have to help you. Some strategies to sidestep conflict. I'll give you a framework for mastering dementia. And last, I like to tell stories because I think it helps bring the material to life. And I would encourage you all to tell your stories to one another today, because your story truly may be exactly the thing that someone else needs to hear. So whoops, I'm skipping ahead of myself. What was the first clue? What was the first clue? Does anyone want to answer that in one or two words that you noticed something was not quite the same with your person? Anyone? Just, you can shout it out. Wasn't as organized. Repetition. Stopped answering the phone. Okay, all of those are good ones, yes. Anger. We'll talk about that today. Can't stick to the plan. Disorganized. So essentially we're saying, they weren't acting or speaking the way they used to be. And that really is the definition for dementia. So definition of dementia is just a change in thinking abilities that is going to be significant enough to impact a person's everyday life. So why are these changes happening? In all forms of dementia, the chemistry of the brain is changing. So we could see someone have a decreased blood flow, inflammation. They could have difficulty clearing out waste material, so that starts building up in the brain. And then, cells begin to die and lose connection with one another. The brain tissue actually shrinks. The size of the brain shrinks. And right now, sadly, we don't have a way to replace brain cells or regrow them. I like this picture from the Dementia Friends organization. I think it helps sort of explain what we're seeing in a non-science-y way. So we can think of the brain as a bookshelf. On a healthy bookshelf, all the books are organized. The top shelf of our bookshelf contains, the cognitive skills we would need to do complex tasks. So things like planning, organizing, problem solving, understanding cause and effect, meaning if I do this, that will happen. In dementia, the higher books are checked out first. So that's why we will see people earlier on have difficulty holding a job, managing finances, following a schedule, making an appointment, driving a car. And then as time goes on, the middle shelves become affected. So that's when we'll see folks experience difficulty with more basic activities. You may have them, see them, for example, not being able to pick out appropriate clothing for the weather. Or maybe they're forgetting a step out of a recipe they've made 100 times. But the crucial thing is this: feelings and emotions will remain long after cognitive skills decline. So a person may not remember that you went to visit them 3 hours ago, but that feeling of connection can linger. Or they would get just as angry as we would. They may not remember they've been told they can't drive, but they'd be just as angry as we would if someone took our car keys away from them, right? So those feelings remain. Basically, dementia is causing people to make mistakes. And the bookcase example and the previous slide just help us understand that these mistakes aren't intentional. The brain is literally changing. Remember this guy? 1989, Back to the Future. So in the movie Back to the Future, Marty McFly, he's gone back in time. He ends up in an earlier version of his hometown. He meets earlier versions of his parents. Things kind of seem oddly familiar, but they're foreign at the same time, and he has to go back and forth between two different realities. The people he encounters think he's a little strange. Some of the stuff he says doesn't make sense. He's walking around in this orange puffy vest, and they ask him why he's wearing a life preserver. And of course, then he tells them Ronald Reagan's the president, and they really kind of think he's odd. Could a person, I wonder, living with dementia, feel a little bit like Marty McFly? Like Marty, they may be trapped in an alternate reality. And when they make mistakes, it may be very tempting for us to, want to correct them when they're wrong. But usually that's not going to work, because remember, the reasoning skills, those higher books on the bookshelf are checked out already. So instead, seeing things from their perspective, kind of like Steve alluded to in the first presentation, is going to help us understand those seemingly unusual things that they say or do. And then once we have a little more clarity, then we can figure out how do we get them through this. Here's a story to illustrate this. My husband's grandma had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and she had moved into a memory care community. Around mealtime every day, staff noticed her change. She started pacing. She started kind of hovering around the kitchen. She seemed really anxious. Well, they thought initially she was hungry, maybe, so let's get her a snack. That didn't work. They tried to distract her, move her away from the kitchen, but she always found her way back. Until one day, one of the daughters was visiting and said, "You know what? Mom ran a dairy farm with Dad. And every day at lunchtime, the farm crew would come in and she'd have to feed them all lunch. This was one of her main duties for the day." Could she be going back in time, in her mind, where the sounds of the kitchen kind of bringing up this long-term memory? Well, this information changed everything, right? So instead of staff trying to correct her, distract her, or move her away, kind of forcing her into their world, they joined hers. They invited her into the kitchen. There were so many things that were still within her abilities to help them with. She could set the table, she could pour water, she could toss the salad. And it changed everything. Sometimes, not quite so easy, right? So what do we do when we really can't initially make sense of what's going on? Often we're going to have to do a bit of detective work to try to understand what they're thinking or why they're doing something. Detective work asks us to pause before we dive in and start trying to help or fix things. So we might ask them some questions. Hey, what you doing? Or why are you going outside at 2 a.m.? Ask questions. We start doing that improv a little bit, like Steve taught us. Or we kind of look at what's going on. What's going on in the environment? Is it noisy? Did they just interact with someone? Did they just come from a different room? Do they seem uncomfortable? Are they hot? Are they tired? So maybe we walk into a room and we see somebody fiddling with the remote control. Ideally, we pause. We do nothing. We just kind of see how they seem. Are they frustrated because they can't find their show? Or are they just kind of exploring the device, pushing the buttons? I would say if there is distress or danger, go ahead and we intervene. But if not, there's so many things that may be a little unusual to us, but are okay, and we can just let them go. When it comes to detective work, family and loved ones are so important because, of course, like in my husband's grandma's case, you know their history. Often we're going to find, after we do detective work or after we have that aha moment, this is what's going on, we're going to find that the root cause of a challenge we face is often an unmet need that maybe can't be communicated or expressed as well as usual or as before. My husband's grandma's unmet need was to make lunch. So here's just another story to illustrate this. My very first companion care client was named Phil. He had quite a life. He played football here at the University of Minnesota. He was on the 1960 national championship team, and very interesting guy, but in those days, remember, we didn't know so much about head injuries, and getting your bell rung was really part of the game. His wife told me a story once I'll never forget about a time, one of the only times he was taken out of a game, because I guess back in the day, they played both offense and defense. Well, Phil had been in a game, he got hit really hard, he was able to get back and kind of make it back to the huddle, only it was the opposing team's huddle. One of the only times he got taken out, and his wife was a physician, and she wondered, could this be related, could his dementia symptoms be related to chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, and we know so much more about that now. By the time I met Phil, he was living in memory care. He was having a really, really hard time adjusting. He was always asking to go home. He could actually become quite agitated and even destructive, but that wasn't who he really was. After playing football, he became a missionary, and when he returned to the United States, he went to medical school right here at the U. He became a beloved family medicine doctor. He loved his family deeply. He wrote poetry, he read poetry, he loved the symphony. He was a huge Frank Sinatra fan. So at his heart, in his core, he was this just kind, lovely, gentle man. But with dementia, he could no longer rely upon his own brilliant mind to lead the way. So he could become quite anxious. He couldn't make sense where he was, what he was doing. He was always looking at his watch. Where am I supposed to be going? What are we doing next? And if he became overwhelmed, it really got to be too much. If no one stepped in to guide him, he could become destructive. Well, what was Phil's need? I think basically he needed a tour guide, someone to kind of show him the way. When staff became aware that his anxiety was ramping up, because there were a lot of warning signs, usually there's going to be warning signs, they could intervene. They could distract him with an activity that was meaningful to him. Phil, it's time to exercise. They use time a lot because he referenced his watch a lot. Or could you help me review a few medical charts in the nursing office? Or your wife is coming at 5. Let's just play a game of cards before she gets here. And that's the shift. We stop asking ourselves, how can I make this stop? How can I make them stop this? And we start asking, what's underneath this? What is the unmet need? I have a new vocabulary word for you. Anosognosia. This is a condition in which a person is unaware of their illness or impairments. And I think this is one of the most difficult things about dementia because it often is going to lead to power struggles, conflict, refusals. And it may seem a lot like denial, like they're denying anything's wrong, but it's not denial, it's not stubbornness. Their brain truly is not recognizing that anything has changed. In this case, it may not seem like they need anything. It's more about our need, maybe, to keep them safe or clean or healthy. But they actually do have a need, and that is a strong need to have their agency, their sense of dignity preserved. They have a need not to be treated like a child. So that's sometimes where that conflict comes in. It's in a very, very difficult balancing act for care partners to achieve. I'm going to tell you a little story about this. One of my coaching clients, he was having a heck of a time with this. His name is Jim, his wife is Michelle, and she could go weeks without bathing. She wasn't aware of her cognitive decline, and she was also losing some awareness of personal hygiene. So, we're talking on the phone, and I asked Jim, how are you approaching this? And he said, I am telling her she stinks, and she needs to take a shower. And we're laughing a little bit, right? Because, we know in her mind she's not aware that she hasn't taken a shower. And furthermore, she's just been insulted. Because remember, those feelings, those low bookshelves, they're going to linger much longer than reasoning ability does. When awareness has declined, arguing, rationalizing, explaining don't really work. Don't worry, I'll tell you what does. Instead, we need to create a reason that makes sense to them. So in Michelle's case, it was really important for her to look nice when she got together with friends. So Jim started suggesting showers on card days. Twice a week, he and Michelle would go play cards with friends. So suddenly, that made sense. When he tied the activity to something meaningful, she was more agreeable. And then he also noticed during his detective work that she would sometimes go into the bathroom and seemingly forget what she was doing. So he started turning the shower on, getting a towel out, and he would take her through the steps as needed, because some days were better than others. Did it work every time? It's dementia, so no, of course not. But it worked maybe about 75% of the time, and that was significantly better. I had another client who had moved from Colorado to be closer to her daughter, and she had a history of kicking out home care agencies. She didn't think she needed any help. She was totally fine, and she did not want strangers in her apartment, and I don't blame her. So I suggested, maybe introducing me slowly. I came over and visited with her daughter and her many times, just for a friendly chat, like a, hey, welcome to Minnesota conversation. And then one day I came over alone, and I said, daughter can't make it today. She asked me if I could take you to the grocery store instead. Would that be okay? And we went from there. Trust had been built. And I got her consent rather than forcing my agenda on her. She started to see me as her friend, not her helper. So in both of those situations, with Jim and my Colorado friend, I had to come up with what I call an angle, like a way to accomplish something that is consistent with their perception of reality. When there's decreased awareness, we just have to get creative, and this is hard. We have to get creative about how we introduce help or other people. And you may ask, is this lying? Is it lying when I tell my Colorado friend that her daughter can't make it? Is it lying if we tell someone who can no longer drive, their car is in the repair shop? I like to reframe that a little bit, because I think this is all about meeting them in their reality, meeting them where they're at. We're trying to reduce distress. We're trying to preserve dignity. So instead of outsmarting the person, I like to refer to it as outsmarting dementia. An intervention is an action we take to improve a situation, and effective dementia interventions have a bunch of things in common, and I'll just mention a few of them today. We have to remember that their brain is going to need a lot more time to process information, kind of losing its connection. So the way we communicate has to be adjusted, and we could do a whole talk on communication. Just mention a few tips here. Of course, speaking slowly and clearly, accommodating for hearing loss. If they're not getting the right input in, we can't really expect them to understand us. Give them more time to answer questions. If you're going to be with a large group, maybe we seat them kind of off in a space that's a little quieter and ask people to come to them for one-on-one conversations. It'll be much easier for them to follow one person rather than a whole group conversation. Routine is up there. Routine maybe seem very boring to us, but it is the friend of a person who's living with dementia. Have you ever driven home from the grocery store and you pull in your driveway and you're like, how the heck did I get here? I don't even remember driving the car home. Well, that's because that activity is so routine, it's become what we call subcortical, meaning we don't even have to think about it. Can you see how routine or subcortical activities would be helpful for a person living with dementia? Their brain just does not have to work so hard. So having a daily schedule that's pretty consistent, going to the same places, being with the same people, that's very comforting to a person living with dementia, can reduce distress. Second characteristic, keep it simple. Simplicity is very important. One way we can keep things simple is to break down tasks into simple steps. When Jim was helping Michelle with the shower, he gave her one direction at a time. Visual cues. Sometimes substituting a visual cue for a verbal direction can be very helpful, especially if someone's has some language issues like aphasia. So what I mean by that is, what if instead of telling someone to go make a sandwich, we set out the bread, the peanut butter, a knife, a plate on the counter. All of a sudden, all the steps are there. All the supplies they need are there. They don't have to remember them. It helps them get started. Here are some other visual strategies. Whoops, is that gonna work? Okay. Can you see how someone would be more independent brushing their teeth with this setup rather than this one? This is kind of a typical calendar. We'll see. Can you see how this one would be easier for them to use? We kind of simplify the visual environment. That can help people be a little bit more independent. Kind of helps them, we can almost help pull their attention to where it needs to go. Actually, in your handouts, I included a template of that daily schedule. I think it's really helpful. One of the things I hear care partners say a lot is, they keep asking me, where are we going? What are we doing? What time are we leaving? When's that appointment? I found this to be kind of a nice, helpful strategy. There are definitely some higher tech options. There's some nice ones out in the other room. But filling that out consistently daily and then posting it in a central location works quite well. You don't have to remind them so much. So when you get asked, when's the doctor? You just say, check your list. That's it. Check your list and get in the routine. Let's see. Whoops, I'm not moving on quite yet. Let's see if I can back up. Going back. Engagement. Engagement is one of the most powerful dementia interventions we have. When we give them something to do, especially if it aligns with their interests and makes them feel purposeful, we can create really beautiful moments of calmness and connection. There's a care partner that I follow on Instagram. Her dad has Alzheimer's, and he's a retired handyman. So every time, before he comes over, she goes around and unscrews the light switch plates in her house. And then when he walks in the door, she hands him a screwdriver and he gets to work. I love that. It's genius. And, here he gets to help his daughter and use his expertise. Those main roles in his life are preserved, right? It's another great way that friends and family members, all this knowledge that you have is so valuable. You know what their usual interests are. All right, now we're moving on. So up to this point, we've been talking about the person who's living with dementia, but I think we leave out half the equation when we leave ourselves out. We don't talk about us. And I believe the most important dementia intervention is very simple, but it's difficult at the same time, and that is our presence. We saw in the story about Phil just how much the presence of another person, really transformed him from someone who was really scared to, back into the kind, gentle man he really was. We also know that people living with dementia will recognize tone of voice, facial expression, body language, long after language skills decline. So calm demeanor just goes a long way in and of itself. But how do we make sure we're bringing the best of ourselves to care when it is so utterly exhausting? I want to tell you, I've had to find out the hard way because I am not a natural caregiver. I'm not especially patient. I like things done a certain way. I don't know if any of you resonate with that. Well, dementia does not care about that, does it? So I've had to learn to adjust. I had to learn to be okay with uncertainty. I have had to stop caring about what other people think when the person I'm with does something really embarrassing. Had to lower the bar on perfect. And to be a little more patient instead of just stepping in to fix and solve everything, because oftentimes a moment will pass and the problem kind of solves itself without any intervention from me. Do I always get this right? No way. I'm human, but I've gotten a lot better at it. And importantly, I found that, a calmer presence just makes me feel so much better and has helped me sustain dementia caregiving, I guess. for a longer period of time. So when we enter dementia care from a more stable place, we are the key to success. We have a saying in rehab that goes like this: without stability, there can be no mobility. And of course, usually when we're talking about this, we're referring to the development of motor skills. Like before we can sit up unsupported, we need to develop our core and trunk muscles. I feel and I found the same thing is true in dementia care. When I stop and stabilize myself, take a moment, pause, and become more steady before I engage, things always go a lot better. And this leads me to the framework that I found supports my stability. M is meditation, A, approach, support, time away, energy management, remember them, and you. And we'll kind of dive into each one of those now. M is for meditation, and there's so many definitions and forms and versions out there, but I think this one serves our purpose for today, a practice intended to achieve a calm, clear, and focused state. And although it'd be wonderful if we all had time to sit beside a lake, meditation doesn't have to look like this. The point is to find something that helps you regulate your own nervous system. It could be getting a breath of fresh air outside, prayer, or doing something creative like creating art or music. Tons of different guided meditations if you're like me and have a hard time corralling those thoughts. Lots of guided meditations on YouTube or tons of different apps out there. Really think about this as taking a moment for yourself. And right now, we've been sitting a while. I'd like to teach you 2 quick things that I do to reset. So if you're able and willing, would you stand up? And I honestly use these a lot, even in the middle of dementia care, because they're really quick and they're stealthy. No one will even know you're doing it. So the first one, just listen to the directions first. We're going to take a deep breath in. You're going to think about filling up the bottom of your lungs first. You're going to hold it at the top for a moment, and then you're going to go, all right, everybody deep breath in, hold it at the top for a moment, and then, oh, we can do better. Keep going. So when you let go, or when you exhale, just let go of all the tension in your belly, your shoulders, your jaw. I like to use this one when tension has built up in myself. I may be frustrated. I've actually done it in front of a couple people and kind of stops them in their track, and I'm like, well, thought I had to sneeze, right? But it does help. The next one is a little bit more gentle and soothing. So this time I want you to breathe normally. And then before you take your next inhale, you're gonna inhale and then you're gonna pause you're gonna exhale and pause, just appreciating that stillness at the end of the breath and before another one continues. I didn't explain that very well, but inhale and exhale, pausing at the end of the exhale, just to appreciate the stillness at the end of the breath. And if your balance is okay, try doing this closing your eyes. And just kind of experience that stillness and spaciousness. This one feels really good. These moments are very small, but I promise you they can change everything. All right, you can go ahead and sit down. Thank you. And the goal is not to feel zen all the time. That is totally impossible. But I think it is realistic to achieve what I call a micro shift. And by micro shift, I mean, if we think back to that 1 to 5 stress scale that I mentioned earlier on, a micro shift would be, maybe we can bring the tension down from a 5 to a 4 in us, or a 4 to a 3 in us. And keep practicing this. Practice it in line, practice it in traffic. When we practice it, it helps us create and reinforces new patterns. A is for approach, and we actually talked a lot about approach already. My approach with Phil was to use engagement to structure our time together, to give him something purposeful to do. Jim's approach with Michelle was to give her a reason, to kind of link showering to something meaningful to her. My husband's grandma, the staff's approach was to invite her to help them. But let's just review a couple of those key points about approach. So meeting them in their reality. If they think it's 1975, we're going there. Be a detective. What are their actions communicating to us? What is underneath? What is the unmet need? Tone over tactic. Are we calm? And it is totally acceptable to fake it until we make it. Remembering that we're not trying to win arguments, we're trying to reduce distress. S is for support, and by support I mean the things that externally build us up, because dementia is not a one-person job. I'm going to repeat that. Dementia is not a one-person job. I know it can be very hard to ask for help, and sometimes it's because we hold some assumptions like, oh, the kids are so busy, I don't want to bother them. Or I already know what they're going to say. Or no one can help the way I do. No, my person won't accept help from anyone else. Or I know what they'll say already. I'd just like to challenge that. People can't help if they don't know how. And we can test that out by maybe making a specific ask. Can you come watch the ball game on Friday with Dad so I can go to my daughter's recital? Simple. And then you can count on that person. Second thing I'll mention is sometimes I'll see people hiding a dementia diagnosis from others, and I totally understand the desire to protect our person from the judgment of others. But honestly, those who are closest to them have likely noticed that something has changed anyway. So go ahead and share. People can't help if they don't know how. Other things, strongly recommend regular appointments with a mental health expert. This trained therapist is going to help us ask the same questions we do in detective work. What's underneath this? Why am I responding this way? And then can help us develop some coping strategies, teach us some better strategies for dealing with stress. Finally, one of the things I love about this conference is the back room. If you haven't been in the back room, there are a ton of people there who offer support for care partners, information on support groups, which are so critical, home care agencies, government agencies, lots of stuff back there, elder law attorneys who not only help us with legal work, but also can help with financial planning for the future. We know that dementia care can be such a huge financial burden. All right, let's see if this works. Okay, I have a riddle for you. What happens when we take the I out of the word illness and we replace it with we? You guys are so smart. It's a great visual. T is for time away. Time away is the number one thing I hear people say they need, and it's probably the number one thing we delay. Dementia has a way of creeping up on people. It's manageable until all of a sudden it's not. And I know sometimes it may seem like too much stress or too much work to even bother trying to figure out how to get away, but let me give you a few tips to make it a little bit easier for you. Start early on, if you can. This will give your helpers an opportunity to get used to the changes of dementia with you, alongside of you, rather than having to maybe enter at a time where they may not feel as competent. 2, it doesn't take a dementia specialist. I think anyone who is just kind and empathetic can make an excellent helper. They can learn about dementia as they go, just like you are, right? I think it is helpful to give them some background information. If you have a helper coming, give them a little bit of information about your person, things about, details about what they like and they don't like. And I have I think in the handouts there's a form that you can fill out, or a template again that you can fill out and leave for them. What makes them happy? When do they get angry? It kind of can give the helper some ideas about what to do with them, or importantly, what topics to avoid, maybe. Again, you may have to slowly ease in people, like I did with my Colorado person. People may be coming over to help you at first or have a chat with you. And I think giving the person who's coming over a few ideas to help break the ice, a few activity ideas, is really helpful. Might be as simple as looking through a photo album together, or maybe your person's giving them a tour of the backyard. I will often find an article about their hometown, and when we have our first visit, we can read through the article, ask them questions, they can reminisce, or maybe a list of questions. I come with a list of questions about their profession. I once worked with an entomologist, which is he has a PhD in insects, basically, so I came over with a whole list of questions about bugs, and I learned a lot from him. And I really have yet to experience someone who wasn't initially hesitant to let another in in. But what I found is that people living with dementia are surprisingly content with one-on-one attention, even if it's not done exactly the way the primary care partner does it, or it's not them. E is for energy management, and occupational therapists talk a lot about using energy management strategies to decrease the risk of physical or mental exhaustion. And it's surprising what a few little changes can do. A few changes can make a big impact. And the concept is this: we have a kind of a bucket of energy each day, and if we're a little bit more mindful about how we dole it out, it can make a big difference in our overall energy and fatigue level. So there's a bunch of items listed there, but I'd like to highlight number 14, the say no part. I think care partners have an automatic out to say no to anything that doesn't meet your needs right now. There's a lot going on. Finally, R is for remember them. Why is there a picture of a lampshade, you might ask? Well, we know when we turn on a lamp, we know the light bulb is there, even though we may not see it because it's hidden by the shade. Some of you may have heard of Eckhart Tolle. He uses the analogy of a lampshade to describe the presence of light in all people. And we can think of the light as maybe a person's essence, what is uniquely them, what we love so much about them. And sadly, dementia can kind of hide the essence, especially to people who maybe don't know your person. But we know it's there, and I know you catch a glimpse. Maybe it's their sense of humor, or a skill or talent they've spent years and years developing, or it's a look. They'll give you a look. And I invite us all just to take a moment to enjoy the essence. Maybe it's just 10 minutes a day, sitting down with them, doing something you both enjoy when they're content, not when they need help. Could be listening to music, dancing, do a puzzle, watch some home movies, kind of re-explore essence. One of the superpowers I think people living with dementia have is the ability to live in the present moment, and this truly is the greatest lesson that I've learned working with them. They've taught me to really be more present and to be more in the moment, and really mastering dementia has almost nothing to do with a person living with dementia, and almost everything to do with me. And so it's my hope that the next time you get rattled, you do nothing. You pause, you take a breath, kind of observe, and then when you have a little more clarity, or if you don't have clarity, you can still have some stability. And that's when you kind of move to lead the way. Joan Rivers, the comedian, said, "It doesn't get better, we get better." And that pretty much sums up dementia for me. And with that, thanks for listening.
Thank you so much. If you have questions written down, if you'd hold up your cards, we can come around and collect those and ask those questions. There's one all the way at the front.
Do you want me to get it?
Thank you.
I can screen this one first, can't I? Okay, subcortical habits. You mentioned the subcortical habits can be helpful for the person with memory loss. Can a person with memory loss develop new subcortical habits after they've been experiencing memory loss, or will they revert to their habits developed before their diagnosis? That's a really good question. It might take a functional MRI to figure out, but people can learn new habits. And we see this all the time. The example that comes to my mind is when maybe transitions to a new living space, like they move to an assisted living or a memory care apartment. And that's an entirely new environment with a new routine. And it does take more time because remember that processing time is slower, but they can form new memories and new habits. Again, lots of repetition is what makes that helpful. Having a tour guide when someone first moves in, and most communities will maybe offer escorts to activities, to meals, keep eyes on the person a little bit longer. So that's what comes to mind with my mind. But I'm not a neurologist. Anyone else?
Excellent. Any other questions?
Awesome.
That was really,
I got let off.
I love that. I honestly, when you said about how you're not trying to win an argument, you're just trying to dispel
Reduce
the stress. That's brilliant. I love that. I'm gonna try to remember those exact words, but I love that sentiment so much because I think it's just our natural reaction. Without even thinking I'm trying to win an argument, you just naturally go to correct something, and it is super hard. And as what we discussed with Steve, and somebody had made a comment earlier that I didn't get to, is the best learning I ever got at this conference is the person with the memory loss is always right. And it's that's that's you can't argue with them, and it's hard to keep that in the front of your mind when you they say something that you don't necessarily agree with, but it's all about trying to dispel the stress and not win an argument. So very well said.
If you have time for a story, I'll tell you my do we have time? What is it, 11:10? Do we have time or no? Thumbs up? Okay, thumbs up. A friend of mine is a teacher. She's a preschool teacher, and her dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, and she would go over to his house, or they shared a cabin, so he'd be up at the cabin tinkering in the garage. She'd go out there, and he was developing some incontinence, so she'd go out there and she'd find this jug of pee, basically, and she went in there and she's like, "Dad, what are you doing? This is so unhygienic. It is so gross. What are people going to think?" And she kept doing this. She's a teacher. It's natural in her to, try to correct someone, to tell them what they're doing wrong, to help them do better next time. But, and he would maybe understand what she was saying in the moment, but, 2 hours later, it would be again. She'd forget his direction. And so what she ended up doing is just going out there. When she saw the jug, she'd just empty it. No need to waste any energy or time on correcting, explaining, and hoping that things will change the next time.
We actually did have a question come in while you were talking, so can't let you go just yet. The question is, and it kind of piggybacks on what we talked about with Steve is what happens when someone with dementia wants to do something dangerous, like drive a car or something?
I know, it's so hard. So this is a hard question, these what ifs or what do I do questions without a lot of information, because remember, we got to do the detective work first and figure out, especially with driving a car, what is going to make sense to them. They may not. It's hard for me to answer because I don't have more information, but I'll tell you what, if some people will be okay with reminders, some people will not. And then, these things like driving a car, owning firearms, those things that can potentially be quite dangerous for themselves and others, those become a situation where we do kind of have to put some boundaries in. Some families have gotten to the point where they need to remove the car so it doesn't become an obstacle. But this is quite a difficult one. And I would just say, do the detective work. What would be a reason that makes sense for them to not drive a car? Sometimes it's a financial one. The doctor says you can't drive, you lost your insurance, da-da-da-da. But sometimes those explanations don't work, and it just is kind of a repeated conversation that has to happen every time.
We've got another question from online too. How would you advise a caregiver whose loved one is sleeping 12 to 18 hours a day?
That may not be a problem, or it may be. What we'll see, especially as dementia advances, is that people will sleep a lot longer, or their days and nights might be mixed up. So I think that's a question, again, maybe for a physician or someone who knows this person a lot better, to understand their total health picture.
All right, looks like we have
New Learning, and I'm a member of the Giving Voice Choir, which is a choir for people with dementias. And in 2018, we gave a concert at the Ordway. It involved three choirs, and I can remember the year because, one, I remember events of different years, so I can go back and do this. But the interesting thing was, it was music that was written specifically for the choir. And it was part of a national music association of people who were songwriters and musicians who were composers. And all the music was new. So over a period of months, with caregivers or support people who would be a support person when they were singing, we went over and over this particular music. And it was a wonderful concert, and the individuals who had dementia were actually able to learn their parts for this concert. And it really brings to mind the importance and the beauty of music in individuals' lives, and how it really stimulates memory. And that's what the whole foundation of the Giving Voice choirs are built on. And it just proved that, yes, over repetition in a period of time and with support, people are able to learn and learn new material.
And
So
thank
that's
you
it.
for sharing. And I also
Okay.
think that that is a great example of the power of music as an intervention. People remember lyrics and tunes long after other cognitive skills have declined. And music just has a way of elevating the mood or calming down the mood too. So I use music I have it playing almost all the time when I'm with someone. So thank you. And that's a wonderful activity, the Giving Voice Choir. And you can all join, she said. All right. Well, thank you very much. Oh,
Okay, wait, one final statement and then we'll take our break and meet back here at 11:30. The statement is, I found this information to also be helpful when communicating with people who don't have memory loss but are always right.
This is so true. I think dementia care partners are the best peacemakers because you have the skills that the world needs right now. And with that, I'm out.